Well, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. marched and mobilized millions to champion civil rights in America. Through a philosophy of nonviolence, King helped advance the United States towards passage of two major civil rights laws in the 20th century. This April marks the 50th anniversary of his assassination. VOA's Rasha Obasadi looks back at the influential, sometimes reluctant leader of the American civil rights movement.
April 9, 1968, the final march of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. King's funeral drew famous faces of the era, including Senator Robert Kennedy, future U.S. President Richard Nixon, and fellow civil rights activist the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Jackson spoke with VOA in August 2011 during the dedication of King's Memorial in Washington.
It's really as a symbol of power and justice and peace and reconciliation. But we had to win some mighty battles to get the reconciliation. I mean, the Battle of Montgomery involved confrontation and endurance, a 381-day struggle.
Your orders to disperse this march will not continue.
The battles of Alabama were for the voting rights denied blacks in many parts of the American South. It was followed by more police violence against civilians in the city of Selma in what came to be known as Bloody Sunday. Congressman John Lewis was one of the leaders of the student protests.
They came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, trampling us with horses, releasing tear gas. I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick. I had a concussion at the bridge. I thought I was going to die. I thought I saw death.
The televised violence sparked a national outcry.
We must let the world know that it is necessary to protest this threefold evil. The problem of the denial of the right to vote to police brutality.
A few days later, a court order gave King permission to lead tens of thousands of demonstrators to march from Selma to Alabama's capital, Montgomery.
Martin Luther King Jr. came by to visit me in my hospital room and said, "John, don't worry, we will make it from Selma to Montgomery, and the Voting Rights Act will be passed."
A year after U.S. President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law, King's strategy of peaceful protest led to the signing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
When he believed in the legal process, he thought litigation alone was too slow. You needed litigation, demonstration, and legislation. He believed in mass action to transform the masses marching and to change the culture that drove us for the need to march.
The most famous was the 1963 March on Washington.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up.
An estimated 250,000 people gathered at the National Mall to hear King's iconic speech. It was a dream of freedom and equality in a country that was built on the backs of the enslaved. Passage of the Civil Rights Act forced legal change in the 1960s, but activists say real change is often slow.
We are a different and a better nation today in the sense that the barbaric laws of and uncivil laws of racial apartheid have ended. So that the social gaps have closed, but the economic gaps, we're free but less equal.
Before his assassination in 1968, King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent campaign for equality. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
Living with albinism or any form of disorder sometimes comes with difficulties. In many cases, such people are victims of rights abuses and oftentimes violent attacks. In Zimbabwe, for instance, the campaign to end stigmatization of people living with albinism has taken a new dimension with the start of the Miss Albinism beauty pageant. The winner, a 22-year-old student, plans to use her title to fight stigma and discrimination she knows only too well. Take a look.
Sitimviso Mutakura knows firsthand how it feels to be treated differently. All her life, she has faced discrimination because of her looks. From being shunned by relatives to getting negative comments on the streets, Sitembiso says the loving environment her parents provided helped her develop confidence in herself and feel comfortable in her skin from a young age. Among efforts aimed at fighting the stigma and creating awareness about albinism is the Miss Albinism beauty pageant in Zimbabwe, the first of its kind in the country. 22-year-old Sitembiso, an undergraduate at the University of Zimbabwe, was among ladies living with albinism in the contest. She emerged winner, beating 12 contestants.
My main mission or reason why I entered into this pageant was to raise awareness due to stigma associated with people with albinism.
Albinism, a congenital disorder characterized by lack of pigmentation in the skin, hair and eyes, affects up to 1 in 15,000 people in sub-Saharan Africa. In many countries, superstition promotes violation of the rights of affected persons. Their body parts are believed to bring wealth and good luck and are used in witchcraft for charms and magical potions. More than 600 attacks on albinos have been reported in 26 African countries since 2007, with almost 2/3 of the victims being children.
What Africa needs to do, or what Zimbabwe needs to do, is to put up policies which help persons with albinism to enhance their lives, so that the difference between a person with albinism or a person with disability, it's not seen. It's not white. It's not seen black and white with as compared to a person who's got no disability.
Zimbabwe is the second country in Africa to hold a beauty pageant for women living with albinism after Kenya launched a similar event in 2016. Organizers look forward to a time when the event becomes an international one, spurring more action at the level.
Now, this week, the world pays tribute to South African anti-apartheid campaigner Winnie Mandela. Mandela, a former wife of the first South African black president, Nelson Mandela, was a prominent member of the ruling African National Congress. Mourners flocked to her home in Johannesburg's suburb of Soweto to say their farewells. Viewers Laditha Hope has more.
Supporters were singing and dancing outside Winnie Mandela's home in respect for her lifetime of work on behalf of her people. The crowd partied to make way for the motorcade of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
The death of Winnie Mandela is a great loss, in that she has been one of the strongest women in our struggle, who suffered immensely under the apartheid regime, who was imprisoned, who was banished, who was treated very badly, separated not only from her husband but from her children as well and her people.
Winnie Mandela was married to Nelson Mandela for 38 years, but he was in jail during most of that time. When he was imprisoned for life in 1964, Winnie continued to fight against apartheid and was jailed, exiled and hounded by the government for her activities. During that time, she gained recognition in the West for her human rights work. Her marriage to Nelson Mandela fell apart soon after his release from prison. She turned out to be less conciliatory than her husband toward the country's white minority. Allegations of torture, kidnapping, corruption and theft led to a lawsuit against Winnie Mandela and the conviction on multiple counts in 2003. Her jail sentence was later suspended after a judge ruled that her crimes were not committed for personal gain. She returned to politics in 2007, and although a polarizing figure, she was seen as an asset to the ruling ANC party.
Mama Winnie Mandela was identified by the masses of our people as the mother of the nation. This was in recognition of a fearless and uncompromising stand that she took against the might of the apartheid regime.
Despite mistakes, Mandela remained an internationally recognized icon of uncompromising struggle against apartheid and for equal rights for the South African black majority.
She was a strong and fearless voice in the struggle for equal rights and will be remembered as a symbol of resistance. The Secretary General wishes to extend his deepest condolences to the people of South Africa as well as to her family.
Zlarica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can also visit us online at voaafrica.com. I'm Vincent McCoy in Washington. Joker Rogers has our last word from Lagos.
Thanks, Vincent. We look forward to bringing you another show next week. ChannelsTV.com, remember, is your source for news, sports, and other programming. I'm Joker Rogers. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.